The rain poured relentlessly, soaking the cracked pavement outside the downtown diner. It was one of those cold November nights where the city felt colder than it looked, where people hurried past each other without a glance, their umbrellas brushing like ghosts in the dark. Inside the glowing diner, the warmth of coffee and the clatter of plates created a small pocket of life against the storm. The manager, David Carson, stood behind the counter checking receipts, his tired eyes glancing occasionally toward the glass door whenever the bell jingled. Business was slow as usual. He sighed, adjusting his name tag. Another long night shift, another battle to keep the old diner afloat. Just as he was about to close the register early, the bell over the door rang again. The sound of the storm rushed in with the wind, and in its midst stood a woman and two small children, drenched from head to toe. The little girl clutched a tattered teddy bear, while the boy, barely 7, shivered under his oversized hoodie. The woman, thin, her face pale with exhaustion, looked around with uncertain eyes before whispering, "Please, we just need to stay for a bit. We'll be quiet, I promise." David frowned. The diner had a strict policy, no loitering, especially at night. And from the look of them, they weren't here to buy food. His assistant, Mara, shot him a sympathetic glance but said nothing. Rules were rules, and the owner had been breathing down David's neck for weeks about homeless people lingering around. David hesitated, then said quietly, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we can't let anyone stay without ordering. It's company policy." The woman's lips trembled. "Please," she whispered, clutching her children closer. "We've been walking for hours. The shelter's full and my kids, they're freezing." The little boy sneezed, his thin shoulders trembling. David's heart twisted slightly, but he steeled himself. "I wish I could, but—" Then the girl looked up at him, her big brown eyes filled with tears. "Mister, please don't throw us out," she said in a small voice. "Mommy said there's always good people in warm places." The word struck something deep in David. He froze for a moment, looking at the children, so fragile yet so polite. The woman quickly pulled them back, whispering apologies. "Come on, kids," she murmured. "We'll find somewhere else." She turned to leave, but just as she did, lightning flashed outside, and David saw her face clearly under the flickering neon light. Something inside him jolted. That face, those eyes, he knew them. "Wait!" he blurted out, his voice breaking slightly. The woman stopped, confused. David stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. "Is your name Elena?" Her eyes widened. "How do you—" He stared at her, disbelief flooding his face. "Elena. Hayes. From Ridgewood High?" Elena's lips parted. For a moment, the years seemed to melt away. "David Carson," she whispered. Mara blinked in confusion, looking between them. David's chest tightened as memories flooded. Back to teenagers sitting under a tree, sharing dreams of escaping their small town, of building better lives. Elena had been his first love, the one who used to bring him sandwiches when his father forgot dinner. They'd lost touch after graduation when she moved away suddenly. And now here she was, so different, so broken, holding two children with the same soft eyes she once had. The silence between them was thick. Finally, David exhaled shakily. You disappeared. Everyone thought you moved overseas." Elena looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "Life didn't turn out how I thought it would." David glanced at the kids, then at her soaked clothes. He swallowed hard, then said, "Come on. Sit down, please." Elena hesitated. "I can't pay." "I didn't ask you to," he said softly, leading them to a corner booth near the heater. He told Mara to bring hot chocolate for the kids and coffee for their mother. Mara gave him a look that said, "Are you sure?" But she obeyed quietly. As the children sipped their drinks, color slowly returning to their faces, David sat opposite Elena. The diner was quiet except for the rain tapping on the windows. "What happened?" he asked gently. Elena stared at her cup, her fingers trembling. "I married someone who wasn't what he seemed," she said softly. "He had charm, money, promises, everything I thought I needed. But he changed after the wedding." The drinking started. Then the shouting, then— She paused, her voice breaking. "When he raised his hand in front of the kids, I ran. We've been moving from town to town, just trying to stay safe." David clenched his fists under the table. "Where is he now?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I just know I can't let him find us." The thunder outside growled like a warning. David looked at the children again, sleeping now against each other in the booth, and his chest ached. He remembered how Elena once dreamed of being an artist, how she used to sketch his face during lunch breaks. Now she looked like a ghost of that girl. You should have called someone, he said softly. She shook her head. Who? My parents disowned me when I married him. I had no one. I still have no one. David felt guilt prick his heart. He had spent the last 10 years building this diner, saving every penny after his own divorce. He had built walls, safe, strong, and unbreakable. But now, looking at Elena, those walls began to crumble. He stood up suddenly. You're not going anywhere tonight, he said firmly. You and the kids can stay here until morning. I'll close early. Elena's eyes filled with tears. David, I can't let you risk your job. It's my diner, he interrupted. I can do what I want. Her mouth fell open slightly. You own this place? He smiled faintly. Yeah, bought it 5 years ago. It's not much, but it's mine. Elena covered her mouth, overcome with emotion. You always said you'd own a place someday, she whispered. I should have believed you. David chuckled softly. You had bigger dreams. She looked away, shame flickering in her eyes. Dreams don't always survive reality. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain softened outside, the sound almost comforting. David quietly brought her a plate of warm pancakes, syrup glistening under the lights. Eat, he said simply. You'll need your strength. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, No one's been this kind to me in years. He shook his head. You deserve kindness, Elena, you always did. Hours passed. The kids slept peacefully while David and Elena talked about the old days, about lost time, about what went wrong and what could still go right. For the first time in years, David laughed genuinely, remembering her old sketches, and the way she used to tease him about his messy handwriting. And for the first time in years, Elena smiled like she meant it. When dawn broke, the rain had stopped. The first light of morning filtered through the windows, painting the diner in gold. The city outside was waking up. Elena stood by the door, her children yawning beside her. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. We'll find somewhere today, I promise. David stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. You don't have to go. She blinked. What? He smiled faintly. I have a spare room upstairs. It's small, but it's warm. You and the kids can stay until you get back on your feet. Tears welled in her eyes again. David, I can't accept that. You can, he interrupted. And you will. I owe you more than you think. She frowned slightly. Owe me? He looked down, his voice trembling. Back in school, when my father died, I was ready to quit everything. But you told me to keep going. You said I had something good inside me, even when I didn't believe it. You saved me, Elena. Let me return the favor. For a long moment, Elena said nothing. Then she stepped forward and hugged him tightly, tears falling freely. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what this means. David smiled softly, looking over her shoulder at the 2 sleepy children watching them. I think I do, he said quietly. The morning sun rose higher, spilling light across the diner floor. For the first time in years, the place didn't feel empty. The days turned into weeks, and the once empty diner slowly filled with life again. The smell of pancakes and laughter of children became part of its rhythm. Elena's 2 kids, Liam and Sophie, helped around after school, wiping tables, refilling napkin holders, sometimes sneaking cookies when they thought no one was watching. David pretended not to notice, his heart warming each time he caught them giggling behind the counter. Upstairs, the small room that had once been a forgotten storage space now looked like a home. Elena had transformed it. Flowers in glass jars, neat blankets on the bed, a few crayon drawings taped to the walls. She had a way of turning emptiness into comfort, and David found himself looking forward to every evening when the family returned after school and errands. The bond between them grew quietly but deeply. David didn't ask for rent, though Elena insisted on helping. She began baking pies and muffins that customers couldn't get enough of. Soon, people started coming to the diner just for Elena's homemade apple pie. The business began to bloom again, and with every passing day, David realized that the warmth returning to his diner wasn't just from the oven, it was from them. One quiet evening after closing, David found Elena sitting in the corner booth sketching. She hadn't drawn in years, but now her hands moved gracefully, as if remembering an old song. He leaned over her shoulder and smiled. You still got it, he said softly. She looked up, her cheeks warming. It's just a hobby now. No, he said, shaking his head. It's part of who you are. For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed. Between them, a connection that felt as familiar as it did new. She smiled faintly. You always knew what to say. He chuckled. You always made me believe I could do more than I thought. The moment lingered, warm and fragile. Then Sophie's sleepy voice broke the silence. Mommy, can we go upstairs now? Elena blinked, smiled, and packed up her sketches. David watched them go, his heart both full and heavy. He hadn't felt this alive in years, but he also knew. Life had taught him not to hope too much. The next morning, just as he was refilling the coffee machine, a sleek black car pulled up outside the diner. The sound of the door slamming shut made him look up. A man in a dark coat stepped out, tall, sharp-featured, and with a look that could freeze the air around him. He pushed the diner door open, eyes scanning the room until they landed on Elena. She froze. The cup in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor. No, she whispered. The man smirked. Found you. David's pulse spiked. Who are you? He demanded, stepping forward. The man's gaze flicked to him, cold and arrogant. Her husband, he said flatly. And you're trespassing on my family. David glanced at Elena, who shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Don't believe him, David, please. The man laughed darkly. You took my kids, Elena. You ran away like a coward. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in? David clenched his jaw. You don't talk to her like that. The man sneered. And who are you? Her new savior? Don't tell me you think she's innocent. She's a thief, a liar. That's enough, David said sharply, his voice calm but dangerous. The few customers inside the diner watched in silence. You need to leave. The man took a step closer. She's my wife. I'll take her and the kids, and there's nothing you can do about it. Elena grabbed David's arm, trembling. He'll hurt them, she whispered. Please don't let him. David moved slightly in front of her. You heard her. You're not taking anyone. The man's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. David took a deep breath. The only mistake I made was letting people like you think you can walk over others. At that moment, Mara, David's assistant, picked up the phone and quietly called the police. The tension thickened, the silence stretched. The man's hand twitched as if considering something rash. But just then, the wail of a siren echoed outside. 2 officers entered within moments, firm and alert. Sir, we received a report of a domestic disturbance. The man's arrogance faltered. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. She's my wife. One officer stepped between them. Sir, we'll need to see identification and proof of custody. As the officers questioned him, David wrapped his arm gently around Elena's shoulders, whispering, It's going to be okay. She nodded weakly, clutching his shirt as tears fell. Minutes later, after some tense exchanges and radio checks, one officer turned toward Elena. Ma'am, your husband has multiple complaints filed against him in 2 states. You did the right thing leaving. The man's face went pale. What? Sir, you're under investigation, the officer said coldly. We'll need you to come with us. The diner fell silent as the officers escorted him outside. The sound of the car door slamming echoed like the end of a nightmare. Elena stood frozen for a moment before collapsing into David's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. He held her tight, whispering, It's over. You're safe now. I promise no one will hurt you again. The next few days were quiet. The kids seemed lighter, happier, their laughter genuine now. Elena smiled more often, though her eyes still carried traces of pain. David gave her space but stayed close whenever she needed to talk. One evening, as they cleaned up after closing, Elena turned to him. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. You don't have to, he replied. I do, she insisted. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You stood up for me when no one else would. You reminded me what kindness feels like. David looked at her, his voice steady but tender. You reminded me what it means to care again. She smiled faintly, tears glistening. I used to believe I was broken beyond repair, but now, maybe I can believe in second chances. He reached out and gently took her hand. Second chances are what make life worth living. For a moment, the world seemed still. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint clinking of cups, the soft golden light reflecting off her face. Elena squeezed his hand, and that small gesture said everything words couldn't. Weeks later, The diner held its first ever community dinner night, an idea Elena came up with to help feed local families in need. The place buzzed with laughter and warmth. David stood behind the counter, watching Elena move through the crowd, smiling, serving, laughing. The light that had once dimmed in her eyes now shone brighter than ever. When the night ended and the last guest left, Elena turned to David. "You know," she said with a smile, "the diner feels different now." He nodded. "Yeah, feels like home." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "It is home. For all of us." David looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, he realized that life had finally come full circle. The girl who once gave him hope had returned. Not as someone broken, but as someone reborn. Outside, snow began to fall gently against the window. Inside, laughter echoed from the children upstairs. Elena looked up at David, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for not throwing us out that night," she whispered. He smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for walking in." And as the snow continued to fall, two hearts, once lost in their own storms, found warmth in each other once again.